So it's finally becoming a bit more acknowledged, even in dietetic school, that the gut microbiome plays a massive role in weight management, and especially weight management long term. So you've all heard of the Firmicutes and the Bacteroidetes species. These are the bacteria species that actually make up majority of the population within most people's guts. And what's really interesting and is quite well acknowledged now is that the Firmicutes species tend to be able to actually make us take up more nutrients, essentially calories, from the meals that we eat. So that's really interesting. So the people that tend to have a higher ratio of the Firmicutes species tend to actually have more of a problem with their weight, as opposed to if you have more of an abundance of the Bacteroidetes species. That's quite interesting. But more recently, there's been some studies coming out that are actually looking at certain bacteria and their capacity to actually increase the production of short-chain fatty acids within our digestive system. And there are certain strains, like, for example, Roseburia, Akkermansia is quite an interesting one, and I'll tell you about that in a second, and Faecalibacterium protsnitzii. There are a few others, but these are certain commensal bacteria that have been shown to be really great at increasing the production of short-chain fatty acids. So, for example, butyrate and propionate within our gastrointestinal system. So, as I said, strains like, for example, Akkermansia are able to actually help us to produce more of these short-chain fatty acids. In particular, I'm talking here about butyrate. Now, what's really cool about butyrate is it's able to actually go and signal for the production of more of a peptide called GLP-1. You've probably heard about GLP-1. It's big news right now because it is something that is stimulated by drugs on the market now, like Ozempic. And the reason it's useful with weight maintenance and obesity is because it's able to lead to the production of more insulin, and it's also able to stimulate parts of the brain that are going to signal higher satiety, so it means you're not going to eat as much. It also does this via slowing down gastric emptying. So if you can imagine, your stomach isn't releasing out the food that's in it as quickly, slows down that gastric emptying, and this is also going to help to lead to satiety as well, with a feeling of fullness. So it makes sense why GLP-1 can be useful in actually helping you to maintain a lower weight and prevent obesity, because if you are stimulating more insulin release, you're obviously going to have better glucose control, and if you're able to slow gastric emptying and stimulate the brain to say, I've had enough to eat, then of course you're able to not eat as much food. Another interesting thing that they're finding about Akkermansia is that it has these proteins on its outer membrane, and they seem to be able to actually bind onto a certain receptor on the cells of our gastrointestinal system, a TLR receptor, which actually helps to stimulate more gut integrity, which essentially means that Akkermansia could be useful in preventing things like leaky gut. Another really cool thing about Akkermansia is that it appears to play a big role in helping to produce more of the mucin layer that is lining our gastrointestinal system. So if you imagine you've got your gut and you've got all the things passing through it, like our food, bacteria, things that have come from our environment, toxins, whatever it is, that's passing through our gut. And then you have this beautiful mucus layer that actually lines the cells of our gut and essentially prevents all of those, potentially harmful things, like even just food, proteins, things like that, and toxins from actually reaching the cells that are underneath. And we know that the cells that line our gut are actually only one layer thick. So of course, if that mucin layer was to be degraded, then things are going to be able to pass down and interact with the cells of our gut. And if we were to actually have any leaky gut, then those particles are able to actually get through and stimulate our immune system. This is why the mucus layer is just so important. But what's interesting about the Akkermansia species is that it's actually able to help with increasing the production of this mucus layer. So it actually kind of goes through and churns through the mucus and actually helps to stimulate the production of more mucus, and also help to feed other microbes that live in there, other good commensal microbes. So I think that's a really interesting point about Akkermansia as well. So what happens if we have a low abundance of these microbes? Well, there's a couple of things that we can do. If somebody, for example, has done some antibiotics, or they have a really low amount of just overall bacteria in their gut, you can actually supplement, of course, some bacteria for a little while. So you can take a probiotic, and some probiotics these days are actually containing some Akkermansia, so that's really interesting as well. But of course, what we need to understand about probiotics is that if you don't feed the bacteria that you're putting in there, they're not going to survive, they're not going to last, and they'll just end up dying off. So you need to make sure that your diet is in the right form that will be able to feed these microbes. Obviously, we know that these microbes really like to consume and ferment fibre. So, of course, if you consume a diet that has some fibre in it, inulin's supposed to be very good at feeding Akkermansia particularly, so that's interesting to note as well. But generally, soluble fibres tend to be quite good in increasing the levels of these microbes. So prebiotics here are quite good. Another thing that's also shown to be pretty good is polyphenols. So a diet that has some polyphenols in it is shown to be pretty good as well, because polyphenols aren't able to be absorbed, so they end up going through the gut, and they can also be fermented as well. So that's an interesting note. Polyphenols are mainly in things like berries. So if you consume a diet that has berries in it, you're generally going to get enough enough polyphenols. The cool thing about that too is that you can actually consume berries on a low carbohydrate diet, and we know that low carbohydrates diets are going to be really great for reducing butyrate as well, and berries are pretty low carb, so you could kind of get the best of both worlds there too. I guess the question is, can you be on a carnivore diet and still have an abundance of these microbes? The answer is I really don't know. There's just not enough data out there to show this yet. From what I can see personally in my own GI map and other people that I've worked with that are doing a basically zero fiber diet, it's all over the place. Really, like mine, for example, had very high Akkermansia, high Roseburia, but very low Faecolobacterium. So I don't know. That could be due to the fact that I did have H. pylori as well, and that can affect abundance levels of the commensals. So who knows? But I am doing a little experiment at the moment by increasing a little bit of my polyphenols by small amounts of some berries in my diet. And also having a little bit of inulin. I'm going to see what happens to my commensal bacteria and whether or not I feel better on these or not, but I'll let you know on that one. So in summary, if you're having troubles with your weight, and maybe this is something you need to look into. What's your microbiome looking like? And do you have enough abundance of these commensal bacteria that are able to help with the production of more short-chain fatty acids and therefore GLP-1? So if you have any more questions, obviously, please text me, let me know. And yeah,